An oil and gas company sent a landman to my door on a Saturday morning and told me they held the mineral rights to my property on Ridgeview Road in Newcomerstown and that they were planning to drill. They said the mineral rights had been severed from the surface estate 73 years ago by a deed that had conveyed the surface to one party and reserved the oil, gas, and mineral rights to the original grantor. They showed me a copy of the 1951 deed. The reservation was there. They said the mineral rights had passed through several owners over the decades and now belonged to their company. They had a title chain for the minerals going back to 1951. They said, I owned the surface. They owned everything underneath it. I'm a physical therapist. I want to say something about Newcomerstown and about Tuscarawas County and about what it means to build a physical therapy practice in a county with the specific economic character of the eastern Ohio Hill Country. The clients of a physical therapy clinic in Tuscarawas County reflect the work that people do in that landscape: manufacturing workers with repetitive stress injuries, farmers with cumulative joint damage from decades of physical work, miners and former miners with the specific constellation of injuries that extractive industries produce, healthcare workers with back injuries from patient transfers, and the retired population whose bodies hold the history of a lifetime of physical labor. Treating these patients requires understanding not only the specific injury or condition, but the accumulated functional adaptations that a life of physical work has produced. The shoulder that stopped reaching overhead when the rotator cuff tore 12 years ago is not the same shoulder that would have been there if the injury had been treated immediately. 12 years of compensatory movement patterns have changed the functional anatomy. Understanding the history is part of the treatment. This is the same principle that the ODMA embeds in property law. The history of use and non-use determines the current functional status of the interest. Non-use changes the structure. The ODMA has made this principle into law. Tuscarawas County and its clients had taught me the principle long before the landman had arrived. The principle had protected the 11 acres. The minerals are mine because of what my patients had taught me. I also want to say something about what treating the cumulative effects of physical labor in Tuscarawas County has taught me about resilience and about what the body retains through years of demanding work. The patients who come to my clinic after decades of physical work carry strength as well as damage. The shoulder that was repaired 15 years ago and that has continued working through the pain is also a shoulder that has developed compensatory muscle mass that a sedentary person would not have. The functional history is complex. There is atrophy and there is hypertrophy. There is restriction and there is strength. There is damage and there is resilience. The job of the physical therapist is to read the complete functional history and to work with what is actually there rather than with an idealized model of what should be there. The ODMA analysis had required the same complete reading, not just the formal chain of title, but the functional history of use and non-use. The landman had given me the formal structure. I had supplied the functional history. The functional history had been decisive. 41 years of non-use had changed the legal structure of the mineral rights, in the same way that years of disuse changed the functional structure of a joint. Both changes are real. Both are documented by examining the functional history carefully. Read the functional history. It holds the truth. The clinic and the property are both in Tuscarawas County, and both are expressions of the same professional and personal identity. A person who has chosen to be here, who knows the specific landscape and the specific people, and who intends to stay. The ODMA case had been a test of that intention in a specific legal arena. The test had been passed. The property is whole. The practice continues. The county has given me the professional relationships and the landscape I had wanted when I had come here. Both are worth protecting. Both were protected. Operated a small outpatient clinic in Tuscarawas County for 11 years, and I work with patients who are recovering from injuries and surgeries and the accumulated wear of labor-intensive lives. Physical therapy requires detailed knowledge of anatomy and movement, and one principle above all others: function and structure are inseparable. You cannot understand why a joint is not moving correctly without understanding the structure that supports the movement and the structural changes that occur when the movement has been absent for an extended period. The landman had told me the mineral rights were theirs. The structure he had described was a 1951 severance deed. I had needed to understand the structural changes that had occurred to those mineral rights over the 73 years since the severance. The Ohio Dormant Mineral Act had been the answer. Ohio Revised Code 5301.56 establishes I want to explain more about the savings event mechanism and about why the legislature designed it as the threshold for keeping mineral rights alive. The concept of a savings event is the legislature's answer to the question, what counts as using a mineral rights interest? The answer the legislature gave is broad and practical. Almost any recorded action that shows the mineral rights holder is aware of the interest and is maintaining it counts as a savings event. A transfer shows the holder valued the interest enough to convey it. A lease shows active development intent. A mortgage shows the holder was using the interest as collateral. Production shows actual extraction. A notice of mineral interest claim is the minimal act of preservation, filing a one-page document saying I hold these rights and I am not abandoning them. The notice can be filed for a nominal fee at the county recorder. It requires almost no effort. The only reason not to file it is that you did not know you needed to, or you had forgotten you had the interest at all. The savings event requirement is designed to be easy to satisfy for any engaged mineral rights holder. The consequence of not satisfying it for 20 years is the complete loss of the interest. The balance is deliberate. The legislature wanted to make it easy to preserve mineral rights and certain that the failure to preserve them would result in their return to the surface owner. The 1983 lease had been the last attempt to develop the minerals under my property. The lease had expired. No production had occurred. No new lease had been executed. No notice had been filed. The interest had been abandoned in every practical sense. The ODMA had said so in every legal sense. The minerals had come home. I also want to say something about the Notice of Mineral Interest claim and about what it means for mineral rights holders who are reading this story and who may have dormant mineral rights they have not maintained through savings events. If you hold severed mineral rights in Ohio and you have not recorded a savings event in the past 20 years, you need to act now. The simplest savings event is a Notice of Mineral Interest claim filed with the county recorder in the county where the mineral rights are located. The notice identifies the mineral rights by the original severance deed and asserts that the interest is still held and has not been abandoned. The recording fee is nominal. The document is short. An attorney can prepare it in under an hour. Filing this notice resets the 20-year clock. You have 20 more years before you need to file again. If you do not file it and 20 years pass without a savings event, the mineral rights lapse under the ODMA and reunite with the surface estate by operation of law. You lose the interest completely and permanently. The surface owner gains it without any action on their part. If you own severed mineral rights in Ohio and you are not certain of the savings event history, search the county recorder for the last recorded instrument affecting your interest. Note its date. If it is more than 15 years ago, contact an attorney about filing a notice of mineral interest claim now. Do not wait. The 20-year clock is running. The Notice of Mineral Interest claim is the least expensive insurance policy in Ohio property law. File it. Do it now. The 20-year clock may be running on mineral rights you hold without knowing it. If your grandparent owned rural Ohio land and you inherited an interest in the minerals, search the county recorder for the last savings event. If it was more than 15 years ago, file the notice. The cost is trivial. The alternative is the complete loss of the interest. File it. The Ohio Dormant Mineral Act. The Act provides that severed mineral rights that have been unused and unpreserved for a period of 20 years automatically lapse and reunite with the surface estate by operation of law. The surface owner acquires the mineral rights without any court proceeding, without any payment, and without any action by the prior mineral rights holder. The reunion happens automatically when two conditions are met. The mineral rights have been separately owned for more than 20 years, and no savings event has occurred within any 20-year period during that time. A savings event is any recorded action that keeps the mineral rights alive. A recorded transfer of the mineral rights. A recorded lease for oil and gas development. A recorded notice of claim. A recorded mortgage on the mineral rights. Or actual production from the property. If none of these savings events has been recorded in any 20-year window since the severance, the mineral rights have lapsed into the surface estate. The landman had shown me a title. I want to say something about what the oil and gas company had represented when the landman had arrived, and about what his title chain had and had not shown. He had been professional and prepared. He had a printed abstract of the mineral rights title going back to 1951. He had shown me the 1951 severance deed clearly. He had shown me the two subsequent transfers. He had shown me the 1983 lease. He had shown me the current company's acquisition of the mineral rights from the prior holder. The chain had been complete and accurate as far as it went. What it had not shown me was the date of the most recent savings event and the calculation of whether 20 years had passed without one. The landman had not mentioned the Ohio Dormant Mineral Act. He had not mentioned the 1983 lease as the last savings event. He had not mentioned the 41-year gap in the recorder index after the lease. Whether this was because he had not known about the ODMA or because he had known and had hoped I had not, is a question I cannot answer. What I can say is that the title chain he had shown me was accurate but incomplete. An accurate but incomplete title chain for mineral rights in Ohio is a common presentation. The completeness requires asking the ODMA question: has a savings event been recorded within any 20-year window? The landman had not asked this question. I had asked it. The recorder had answered it. The answer had been no. The no had meant the minerals were mine. Ask the ODMA question. The recorder holds the answer. I also want to say something about the specific anatomy of the landman's title chain and about what a complete ODMA analysis would have added to it. The landman's abstract had shown a legally accurate chain of mineral rights ownership. Every deed in the chain had been properly recorded. Every transfer had been properly executed. The chain from 1951 to the present company had been continuous. What the abstract had not included was an analysis of the savings event gaps. A complete mineral rights abstract for Ohio property should include for each instrument the recording date, the parties, the consideration, and whether the instrument constitutes a savings event. It should then identify the most recent savings event and calculate whether any 20-year gap has existed in the savings event history. If the abstract does this analysis and finds a 20-year gap, the abstract should prominently note the ODMA lapse risk. The landman's abstract had not done this analysis. The gap between the 1983 lease and the present had not been noted. The ODMA had not been mentioned. The abstract had been technically complete in its chain and functionally incomplete in its analysis. This is the specific incompleteness that the ODMA requires mineral rights claimants to address. Before any company presents a mineral rights title chain to a surface owner in Ohio, they should have done the ODMA analysis. Many do not. Some do not know to. Some know and hope the surface owner does not. Do the analysis yourself. The recorder holds everything you need to do it. Ask for a complete ODMA analysis when any mineral rights claimant presents a title chain to you in Ohio, not just a chain of title, a chain of savings events. The two are different analyses. The chain of title follows the deed trail. The savings event analysis asks whether the deed trail has been maintained through recorded actions. You need both. The landman had given me one. I had supplied the other. My analysis had been decisive. Request the savings event analysis from any Ohio mineral rights claimant before you engage with them on any lease or development agreement. The ODMA is the surface owner's tool for recovering what decades of neglect by mineral rights holders had effectively abandoned. Use the tool. The legislature designed it for you. The recorder holds the evidence you need to use it. 2 hours of searching, 1 attorney call, 1 affidavit. The company withdrew. The tool works. Chain for the mineral rights from 1951 to the present. The chain had included 2 recorded transfers and 1 recorded lease. I had gone home and had searched the Tuscarawas County Recorder's Index that afternoon. I had found the 1951 severance deed. I had found the first transfer of the mineral rights, recorded in 1968. I had found the second transfer, recorded in 1979. I had found the recorded lease, which had been executed in 1983 and recorded in 1983. Then I had searched for any savings event after 1983. There were none. No recorded transfers, no recorded leases, no production records, no notice of mineral rights claim. The most recent savings event in the Recorder's Index had been the 1983 lease. That lease had expired. No new savings event had been recorded in the 41 years since. Before I go on, if this story, I want to say something about the Ridgeview Road property and about the specific landscape quality of the eastern Ohio hill country and about what it had meant to find forested ridgeland in Tuscarawas County. After 3 years of looking, the 11 acres had been the specific combination I had been looking for. A forested ridgeline with the particular oak and hickory character of the eastern Ohio uplands, a creek ravine at the lower end of the property, a cleared area around the house with enough south and east exposure for a serious kitchen garden. The second-growth forest on the upper slopes had the quality of forest that is old enough to have developed a full understory, but young enough that the canopy is not closed. Filtered light in summer, clear views of the ridge in winter. I had walked the entire 11 acres the day I had seen it, and had known by the time I had come back down the ridge that I was going to make an offer. The creek at the bottom had been clear and running in early spring, and had the specific quality of a small eastern Ohio stream, limestone cobbles in the bed, watercress in the slow stretches, the particular sound that moving water in a narrow valley makes. When the landman had appeared at my door and had told me his company had the right to drill under all of this, I had understood that the stakes were not abstract. The minerals under this specific ridge and this specific creek valley were what was in question. The ODMA had held that the minerals were mine. The minerals belong to the ridge. The ridge belongs to me. The creek still runs. I also want to say something about what the 11 acres looked like in the autumn after the landman had come and gone, and the affidavit had been recorded, and the oil company had withdrawn. The oak and hickory forest on the upper ridge had turned in October. The oaks in their specific red-brown that holds through November, the hickories in yellow that drops earlier. The creek at the bottom of the ravine had been running lower than spring, but still clear over the limestone cobbles. I had walked the boundary of the property on a clear October afternoon after Emeka had sent me the recorded affidavit. The property had not changed. The ridge had been the same ridge. The creek had been the same creek, but the legal structure supporting my ownership had changed. It was now complete in a way it had not been when I had walked the boundary the day I had made the offer to buy. On that day I had not known that the mineral rights had been severed in 1951, or that they had lapsed under the ODMA, or that an oil company would one day come to my door claiming them. The affidavit had resolved all of that. The title to the 11 acres was unified. Surface and minerals. Ridge and creek and everything below. I had walked the full boundary that October afternoon knowing that all of it was mine in every legal sense. The walk had felt different than previous walks. Ownership that is certain and ownership that is uncertain feel different in the body. I had felt the certainty that afternoon. The ridge holds. The October walk had been the first walk on the property where I had felt that the legal ownership matched the physical reality completely. The ridge and the creek and the minerals below had all been mine in that moment in a way that they had not been before the affidavit. Not because the mineral rights had not been legally mine before. The ODMA lapse had occurred in 2008, years before I had purchased the property. But the legal certainty had not been confirmed and documented before the affidavit. After the affidavit, the certainty was in the public record. The walk had felt different. That is what a clean and recorded title feels like. It feels different from an uncertain one. The 11 acres are mine in every legal sense now. The minerals reunited with the surface by operation of the ODMA. The affidavit confirmed it. The recorder holds the confirmation. I walk the ridge knowing this. The knowledge is present on every walk. The land and the law are consistent with each other. Consistency between physical reality and legal reality is what a clean title feels like. The title is clean. Connects with something real in your life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely feel it. Drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. My name is Nkiruka. I am 44 years old. And this is the story of how the Ohio Dormant Mineral Act established that the severed mineral rights under my Ridgeview Road property had automatically lapsed and reunited with the surface estate more than 20 years ago. And what an attorney named Emeka Adichie, who had been practicing oil and gas and property law in Tuscarawas County for 16 years, did when the oil company challenged that position. Now let me explain the Ohio Dormant. I want to say something about the conversation I had had with Emeka after the oil company had withdrawn, and about what he had told me about the oil company's likely understanding of their own position. He had said, they may not have known the ODMA had run. He had said that companies acquiring mineral rights packages in the shale era were sometimes working from title chains that had been assembled quickly and incompletely. A fast title chain shows the chain of ownership. It may not show whether each link in the chain has been preserved through savings events. A company that acquires a mineral rights interest without a complete ODMA analysis may genuinely believe it has acquired something valid when in fact it has acquired something that had already lapsed. The title chain looks unbroken if you follow the deed trail. The ODMA analysis requires not following the deed trail, but asking whether any 20-year gap without a savings event had occurred anywhere in the history. The deed trail cannot show you this. Only the recorder index search combined with the ODMA knowledge shows you this. The oil company had a legally inadequate interest. Their attorney, when presented with the affidavit and the ODMA analysis, had recognized this. The withdrawal had followed. Companies that know the ODMA do not acquire interest without checking the savings event history. Companies that did not know it, or that had not checked, had acquired what the affidavit confirmed was nothing. The minerals had already been mined. The affidavit confirmed it. Emeka recorded it. The recorder holds it. The company knew. I also want to say something about what the shale era had done to the dormant mineral rights landscape in eastern Ohio, and about why so many surface owners are receiving landman visits that they had never expected to receive. The Utica and Marcellus shale formations underlie much of eastern and central Ohio and have made the mineral rights under land that had been economically uninteresting for decades suddenly valuable. The technology for horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing had changed the economics of deep shale development in a way that had not been foreseeable when the 1983 lease on my property had been executed. The 1983 lease had been for conventional oil and gas development. The shale technology that had made my property subsurface interesting to the company that sent the landman had not existed in 1983. The gap in savings events from 1983 to the present had partly been a gap in economic interest. The minerals had not been worth maintaining through the period when conventional development was uneconomical and shale development had not yet been viable. By the time the economics had changed, the 20-year clock had long since run. The shale era had made dormant mineral rights valuable at exactly the moment when many of them had already lapsed under the ODMO. This timing had produced exactly the situation I had experienced. A company with a mineral rights chain arriving at a surface owner's door with rights that had already lapsed. Know the ODMA. The shale era is still producing these visits. Tuscarawas County surface owners who have rural land with any oil and gas history should search the recorder for mineral rights severances proactively before the landman arrives. A landman visit is not the only way to discover an ODMA issue. You can discover it yourself in an afternoon with the County Recorder portal. Search the chain of title for any severance. If you find one, do the ODMA analysis. The shale era has not ended. More landmen will come to more doors. Know your ODMA position before they arrive. The Recorder portal is free and public and available right now. Use it. I did. Mineral Act more fully and about why it exists and what structural problem in property law it was designed to solve. When mineral rights are severed from the surface estate, two separate ownership interests come into existence for the same parcel of land. The surface owner owns the right to use the surface. The mineral rights holder owns the right to the subsurface resources. These two ownerships can persist and be transferred separately for generations. Over time, the mineral rights often pass through many hands through inheritance, and sale and the chain of ownership becomes difficult to trace. Meanwhile, the mineral rights may sit unused. No drilling, no leasing, no production, nothing happening beneath the surface. After many decades of this disconnection, the identity of the current mineral rights holder may be entirely obscure. The surface owner cannot develop the property, cannot sell it with full mineral rights, cannot grant a unified mineral and surface lease, and may not know who holds the minerals or how to reach them. The mineral rights holder may be unaware of the asset, may be a dissolved corporation, may be an estate that has never been fully administered, or may be a person who died leaving unclear succession. The dormant mineral. I want to say something about what anyone who receives a visit from an oil and gas landman should do before they agree to anything or sign anything or accept any characterization of the legal situation. The first step is to search the County Recorder Index for every recorded instrument affecting the mineral rights under your property. Start with the title, "The Landman Presents." Confirm the original severance in the Recorder Index. Confirm each subsequent transfer. Confirm each recorded lease. Then search for every instrument you can find after the most recent recorded lease or transfer. Production records, if the county recorder records them, notices of mineral interest claim, mortgages on the mineral rights, any instrument that could constitute a savings event. Note the date of the most recent savings event you find. Then calculate. Has a period of 20 consecutive years passed without a savings event at any point since the severance? If yes, the ODMA analysis applies. The second step is to call a real estate or oil and gas attorney in your county who is familiar with the Ohio Dormant Mineral Act. Not every general practitioner knows the ODMA well. Ask specifically about RC 5301.56 and the savings event analysis. Bring your recorder index search results to the attorney. The third step is to not sign anything the landman presents until you have completed steps 1 and 2. A lease you sign without knowing the ODMA analysis is a savings event that resets the 20-year clock. A lease you sign on rights that have already lapsed is a grant of something you already own. Do not sign. Do the search. Call the attorney. Know the ODMA analysts before you act. I also want to say something about the specific timing that the ODMA analysis had established for when the lapse had occurred and what this had meant for the state of the title during the period between the lapse and the affidavit. The 1983 lease had been for a 5-year primary term. Adding 5 years to 1983 puts the lease expiration at approximately 1988, assuming no production had occurred to extend it. The 20-year clock under the ODMA had started running in approximately 1988. Adding 20 years puts the ODMA lapse date at approximately 2008. From 2008 forward, the mineral rights had been part of my surface estate by operation of law, even though no one had recorded an affidavit saying so. The lapse had occurred automatically without any action by me or by the prior surface owner. I had purchased the property after 2008. When I had purchased it, the mineral rights had already lapsed and reunited with the surface estate. I had purchased a unified property even though neither I nor my title company had known about the ODMA issue at the time. The affidavit had not created the reunification. It had confirmed and recorded a reunification that had already occurred by operation of law. The affidavit was the public record evidence of a legal reality that had existed before the oil company arrived, before I had searched the recorder, and before Emeka had prepared the document. The law had acted before any of us had known about it. The affidavit had made the law's action visible in the public record. Both were necessary. The minerals had been mine already. The affidavit confirmed it. The ODMA lapse analysis is straightforward for any property owner who is willing to spend 2 hours with the county recorder portal. The analysis I had done that Saturday afternoon had taken 2 hours. It had been sufficient to identify the 1983 lease as the last savings event and to understand that 41 years had passed since then. I had not had legal training. I had had the recorder portal and a clear question. The clear question had been, when was the last savings event? The portal had answered it. The answer had identified the lapse. 2 hours. Know the question. Use the portal. The answer is there. Right becomes a cloud on the surface title and a practical barrier to unified development. The Ohio Dormant Mineral Act solves this by imposing a use it or lose it rule on severed mineral rights. Every 20 years, the mineral rights holder must take some recorded action to keep the mineral rights alive: a transfer, a lease, production, a notice. If no such savings event is recorded for 20 years, the mineral rights lapse. They do not escheat to the state. They reunite with the surface estate. The surface owner holds the complete bundle of property rights again. The oil and gas company's title chain had shown me exactly what I had suspected when I had read the ODMA. The last savings event had been the 1983 lease. That lease had been for a 5-year primary term with an extension clause that had lapsed when no production had occurred. From the lease expiration in approximately 1988 forward, there had been no savings event for 36 years. The 20-year period under the ODMA had run entirely within that 36-year gap. The mineral rights had lapsed automatically under the ODMA at some point in or around 2008, 20 years after the lease expiration. By the time the landman had knocked on my door, the minerals had been mine for more than 15 years. Emeka Adichie confirmed this analysis. I want to describe the afternoon I had spent searching the Tuscarawas County Recorder Index and what the specific sequence of that search had revealed. The landman had left me a copy of the title chain he had been working from. I had set it on the kitchen table and had opened the Tuscarawas County Recorder portal on my laptop. The portal was searchable by grantor and grantee name and by property description. I had searched for the 1951 severance deed first. It had appeared in the index immediately. A deed recorded in April of 1951, grantor the original owner, grantee the surface estate buyer, with the mineral rights reserved to the grantor. I had then searched for the first transfer of the mineral rights. It had appeared in 1968, a deed conveying the mineral rights from the original grantor to a second party. The second transfer had appeared in 1979. The 1983 lease had appeared as expected. I had then continued the search for any instrument recorded after 1983 that named the mineral rights or the property in connection with oil and gas rights. I had searched under every party name in the landman's chain. I had searched under the property description. I had searched under the successive corporate names the landman had listed as successors. Nothing. The index had been silent for 41 years on the subject of oil and gas rights on my property. The silence had been the answer. 41 years of silence in the recorder index is not absence of activity. Under the ODMA, it is a completed legal event. The passage of 20 years without a savings event had transferred the mineral rights back to the surface estate by operation of law. The search had taken 2 hours. The minerals had been mined for 15 years. The landman had not known it. The recorder had held the evidence of the lapse in the form of nothing, the absence of any savings event after 1983. I also want to say something about the specific feeling of finding the answer in the recorder index through the absence of an entry rather than the presence of one. In physical therapy, the absence of movement is itself a finding. When a joint does not move through a range it should be able to move through, the absence is the clinical data. You document the absence as precisely as you would document any positive finding. The recorder search had been the same. The absence of any savings event after 1983 was the finding. The 41-year gap was the data. I had documented it by printing the search results showing the last instrument dated 1983 and the silence of the index after that. This documentation of absence had been the core of Emeka's affidavit. The absence of savings events for more than 20 years was the legal fact that had transferred the mineral rights to me. An absence can be decisive. The recorder holds absences as well as presences. Know how to read both. The absence of savings events after 1983 was the most important thing the recorder had shown me. It had shown it in the form of nothing. Nothing had been everything. I had printed the nothing. Emeka had filed it. The court had acknowledged it. The minerals are mine because of what the recorder did not show. The recorder index is organized to show what was recorded. It is equally organized to show what was not recorded. The absence of entries in a name index for a 41-year period is a documented silence. You document a silence by searching comprehensively and showing the search results with their date ranges. The comprehensive search with no results after 1983 was the evidence. Print the search results. They hold the proof of the absence. The absence is the proof of the lapse. Document the absence as carefully as you would document a positive finding. I had printed every search result. The printed absence had been the core of the affidavit. Emeka had attached it as exhibit. The exhibit had been the proof. He said, "The ODMA analysis is correct." He said the 1983 lease was the last savings event and that its expiration had started the 20-year clock, and that the clock had run without interruption for more than 20 years. He said the mineral rights had lapsed by operation of law. He said we needed to record an affidavit of abandonment and lapse of mineral rights with the Tuscarawas County Recorder to establish the lapse in the public record and to extinguish the oil company's claim. The affidavit identified the 1951 severance deed, traced the recorded chain of mineral rights ownership, identified the 1983 lease as the last savings event, noted the absence of any subsequent savings event for more than 20 years, and asserted the lapse of the mineral rights under Ohio RC 5301.56. The affidavit was recorded with the Tuscarawas County Recorder. The oil and gas company received a copy of the affidavit and the legal analysis. Their attorney reviewed it. They did not return to the property. The landman did not come back. I want to say something before I go. I want to say something about what Emeka Adichie had said about the Affidavit of Abandonment and about what it had needed to contain to establish the lapse clearly in the public record. An Affidavit of Abandonment and lapse of mineral rights under the Ohio Dormant Mineral Act is a recorded instrument that does several things. First, it identifies the original severance, the deed by which the mineral rights were separated from the surface estate, with its recording information. Then it traces the chain of mineral rights ownership from the severance forward, identifying each recorded transfer and each recorded lease. Then it identifies the most recent savings event, in my case, the 1983 lease. Then it states the absence of any subsequent savings event for more than 20 years. Then it asserts the lapse of the mineral rights under Ohio RC 5301.56 L's operation of law and the reunification of the mineral rights with the surface estate. The affidavit is signed by the surface owner or the surface owner's attorney and is notarized and recorded with the county recorder. Once recorded, the affidavit is part of the public record of the property. It puts any party who subsequently searches the title on notice that the mineral rights are claimed to have lapsed and reunited with the surface estate. Emeka had prepared the affidavit with the complete chain of title for the mineral rights attached as an exhibit, and with the recorder index search results attached, showing the absence of any savings event after the 1983 lease. The affidavit had been comprehensive. A comprehensive affidavit produces a reliable result. The oil company's attorney had reviewed it. The review had produced the withdrawal. They had not returned. The minerals are mine. I also want to say something about what Emeka had said about the oil and gas company's options after receiving the affidavit and about why they had withdrawn rather than challenged. He had said, when the ODMA lapse is clean and the recorder index shows no savings event for more than 20 years, a competent attorney for the oil company will advise withdrawal. The cost of challenging a clean ODMA lapse is high and the probability of success is low. The Ohio Supreme Court has upheld the ODMA against constitutional challenges. The statute has been applied consistently by Ohio courts. A challenge to a well-documented lapse would require establishing either that a savings event had occurred that the affidavit had missed or that the statute was unconstitutional as applied. The first ground required evidence the company did not have. The second ground had already been rejected by Ohio courts. The cost-benefit analysis for the company had been straightforward. Litigating a clean lapse was not worth the cost of litigation. The withdrawal had been a rational business decision. The affidavit had made the decision rational by documenting the lapse so clearly that the cost of challenging it exceeded the expected value of the mineral rights at issue. A well-prepared affidavit does not merely state the legal conclusion. It makes the legal conclusion so well supported that challenging it is economically irrational. Emeka's affidavit had been well prepared. The company had run the analysis. They had withdrawn. The withdrawal had come in a short letter from the company's attorney. Adichie had forwarded it to me with a note. Case closed. The letter had not conceded anything gracefully. It had said only that the company was withdrawing its claim to develop the minerals under the property. The language had been minimal, but the effect had been complete. No claim, no development right, no landman. The property is mine in its entirety. A well-prepared affidavit does not need graceful concession. It needs a withdrawal. The withdrawal had come. Not about the oil company whose title chain had been technically accurate as to the original severance and the subsequent transfers and the 1983 lease, about the functional anatomy of property rights and about what the physical therapy training had given me in this situation. The landman had shown me the skeleton, a 1951 severance deed, and a chain of recorded transfers. What he had not shown me was the functional state of the structure, whether the mineral rights had been maintained through savings events or whether they had atrophied through non-use until the law had treated them as abandoned. Physical therapy teaches you that the absence of function over time is not neutral. It produces structural change. Joint capsules tighten, muscles atrophy, movement patterns reorganize around the limitation. Mineral rights that are not used for 20 years do not simply wait. Under the ODMA, they change their legal state. The law treats the non-use as abandonment and reunites the severed interest with the surface estate. The structure and the function are inseparable. The landman had seen the structure. I had examined the function. The function had told the complete story. The mineral rights had atrophied out of existence long before the landman had arrived. Thank you for staying until the end. I want to end with something about the creek at the bottom of the ravine and about what it represents in the context of this story. The creek runs through the lowest part of the 11 acres where the ridge comes down to meet the valley floor. In early spring, when the redbud is blooming on the south-facing slopes and the trillium is coming up in the understory, The creek is running full from the winter snowmelt and the spring rains. The water comes down from the ridge and moves through the property and continues down the valley. The oil and gas beneath this specific creek valley had been severed from the surface in 1951 and had been effectively abandoned from the mid-1980s forward. No one had tried to drill in all the years between 1951 and the landman's visit. The creek had run through the property in all those years without knowing that ownership of the subsurface was technically separate from ownership of the surface. Property law creates these distinctions. Property law also has mechanisms for healing them when they have been neglected long enough to have lost their practical meaning. The ODMA is one of those mechanisms. 41 years of non-use had been long enough. The lapse had reunited what the 1951 deed had divided. The creek runs through land that is unified in its ownership from the canopy to the bedrock. The surface and the mineral rights are mined together. The statute had healed the division. The law and the landscape are consistent. The creek still runs. The ridge is whole. Both will hold as long as I tend them and the ODMA holds. It holds. Ohio RC 5301.56. It holds. Read it. I also want to end with something about what the physical therapy principle and the ODMA principle share, and about why I think about them together now when I'm walking the ridge on the Harmony Road property. The physical therapy principle is that the absence of function over time produces irreversible structural change. A joint that does not move for years is not the same joint that would exist if it had been moving. The capsule has contracted. The cartilage has changed. The surrounding musculature has reorganized. The original functional potential is not recoverable in its entirety. The ODMA principle is the same. The absence of recorded action for 20 years produces irreversible legal change. The mineral rights that have lapsed under the ODMA are not recoverable. They have reunited with the surface estate by operation of law. The oil company's title chain had not been able to reverse this structural change. The structural change had already happened. The affidavit had confirmed it. Both principles say the same thing in their respective domains: use it or lose it. Maintain the function or accept the structural change. Record the savings event or accept the lapse. I had understood the ODMA through the physical therapy principle before I had understood it as a matter of property law. The principle had transferred between domains. The ridge is whole because the principle transferred. Ohio RC 5301.56. Non-use changes the structure. The structure had changed. The minerals are mine. Ohio RC 5301.56 is publicly available at codes.ohio.gov. Read it. The savings event definitions are in subsection A. The lapse provision is in subsection B. The 20-year period is clearly stated. The statute is specific and readable. If you own land in eastern Ohio with any oil and gas history, read the statute. Then search the recorder. Then call an attorney if you find a severance. The principle is clear. Non-use over 20 years changes the legal structure. The statute says so. The recorder shows the evidence. The two together produce the result. The ridge is whole because I read both. If this story made you feel something, write it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to hear the story of a farmer whose neighbor had severed mineral rights in the 1940s and whose grandchildren had discovered those rights were worth money in the new shale era, and what the Ohio Dormant Mineral Act had established about whether those rights had survived the decades of non-use, it is waiting for you in the description below. Click it. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And if someone tells you they hold severed mineral rights under your property before you accept that they have the right to drill, search the Tuscarawas County Recorder Index for every savings event since the severance. Find the last one. Count 20 years forward from the last one. If 20 years pass without a new savings event, the Ohio Dormant Mineral Act may have already reunited those mineral rights with your surface estate. The recorder holds the evidence. The statute holds the rule. Together, they may tell you that the minerals are already yours. They were mine. The landman had not known it. I had found it that afternoon. I want to tell you more about Newcomerstown and about Tuscarawas County and about the Ridgeview Road property and what it had meant to find land in the eastern Ohio Hill Country when I had been looking for a place to settle. Newcomerstown is a small town in Tuscarawas County in eastern Ohio, along the Tuscarawas River south of New Philadelphia. in the specific landscape of the eastern Ohio Hill Country, where the flat agricultural plain of the western counties gives way to the forested ridges and creek valleys that characterize the Appalachian Transition Zone. The county has a history shaped by coal and clay and oil and gas. The underground resources of the eastern Ohio hills have been exploited for generations, and the landscape reflects this history in the abandoned mines, the reclaimed surface mining sites, the oil field infrastructure scattered through the farms and woodlots, and the specific cultural legacy of communities built around extraction industries. The Ridgeview Road property had been 11 acres on one of the forested ridges east of Newcomerstown, second-growth oak and hickory forest on the upper slopes, a creek at the bottom of the ravine, a cleared area with a small house that had been built in the 1960s and maintained with modest but consistent care by a series of owners. I had been looking for rural land in eastern Ohio for 3 years before finding it. The physical therapy clinic drew clients from a wide area of Tuscarawas County, and I had wanted to be rooted in the county rather than commuting from elsewhere. The 11 acres had offered space for a large garden, the specific quality of forested ridgeline that I had been looking for, and a price accessible to someone running a small outpatient clinic. I had made an offer within a week of seeing it. I want to say something about the physical therapy work and about what working with the cumulative effects of long-term non-use had given me as a clinical understanding that had then applied to the ODMA analysis. Much of what I treat is the consequence of extended disuse. The patient who stopped using a shoulder after AI want to describe what the Tuscarawas County Recorder portal now shows for the Ridgeview Road property and what the complete instrument history tells a future reader. The portal shows the original deed conveying the surface estate in 1951 with the mineral rights reserved. It shows the chain of mineral rights transfers, 1968, 1979. It shows the 1983 lease. And it now shows the Affidavit of Abandonment and Lapse of Mineral Rights recorded after Emeka had prepared it. This 5-instrument record tells the complete story of the mineral rights under the Ridgeview Road property. Severed in 1951, transferred twice, leased once, never used or preserved again, lapsed by operation of the ODMA, reunited with the surface estate, confirmed by affidavit. Any future landman who searches the Tuscarawas County Recorder for the mineral rights on this property will find the affidavit. They will understand what it means. They will not come to my door. The complete instrument history is in the public record. The question of who owns the minerals under the Ridgeview Road property has been answered in that record. The answer is the surface owner. The surface owner is me. The recorder says so. The statute made it so. The oak and hickory ridge above the creek belongs to me in its entirety, surface and minerals and everything in between. All of it mine. The landman is not coming back. The record will show any future landman why. I also want to say something about what I now tell patients and colleagues in Tuscarawas County when the subject of oil and gas rights comes up and about, what advice I give to people who are buying rural land in eastern Ohio. The advice is simple and specific. When you purchase rural land in Tuscarawas County or any eastern Ohio county with an oil and gas history, ask your real estate attorney to search the Recorder Index for any mineral rights severance in the property's chain of title. If a severance is found, ask for an ODMA analysis identifying the last savings event and calculating whether the 20-year period has run. If the 20-year period has run, consider recording an affidavit of abandonment before closing to establish the reunification in the public record while you have the clarity of the pre-closing moment. If the ODMA analysis is unclear or contested, adjust the purchase price to account for the fact that the mineral rights may be held by a third party and may have economic value. Do not purchase eastern Ohio rural land without knowing the mineral rights status. The shale era has made mineral rights that were economically invisible for decades suddenly visible and valuable. The ODMA has given surface owners a powerful tool for recovering lapsed mineral rights. Use it. I used it. The 11 acres on Ridgeview Road is fully mine. Know the status of the minerals under your land. The recorder holds the evidence. The statute holds the rule. The simple advice covers the most common situation. For complex situations where the savings event history is ambiguous, where there may have been production that was not recorded, where the prior mineral rights holders are still active and aware of the interest, the analysis is more involved and the attorney's guidance is essential. But the starting point is always the same. Search the recorder, find the last savings event. Count 20 years forward. If 20 years have passed, you have a strong ODMA position. Start there. Go to the attorney from there with the analysis in hand. The analysis makes the attorney call more productive and less expensive. Emeka Adichie practices in Tuscarawas County and knows the ODMA well. If you are in Eastern Ohio and you need an ODMA analysis, find an attorney with specific experience in Ohio oil and gas law. The ODMA is a specialized area within real property law. A general practitioner may not know it. Ask specifically about RC 5301.56 and savings events when you call. If they do not know what you are asking about, find someone who does. The right attorney makes the ODMA analysis straightforward. Emeka had made mine straightforward. The minerals are mine, surgery, and whose capsule has now contracted. The patient whose ankle range of motion has decreased over 2 years of avoiding the painful movement. The knee that has reorganized its movement pattern around a muscle imbalance that has been present for so long that the imbalance has become the baseline. In each of these cases, the structure that I see on imaging or in the physical examination is not the original structure. It has been modified by the pattern of non-use. The non-use has not been neutral. It has produced a specific structural change that is now the functional reality. When the landman had told me about the severed mineral rights, I had understood instinctively that the relevant clinical question was not what the original severance had established, but what 41 years of non-use had done to the structure. The answer had been in the Ohio Dormant Mineral Act. The act had said, non-use over 20 years changes the legal structure. The mineral rights atrophy out of legal existence and reunite with the surface estate. The clinical principle and the legal principle were the same. Non-use over time is not neutral. It changes the structure. I had known this about joints before I had known it about mineral rights. The principle had transferred. I want to say something about what Emeka Adichie had told me about how frequently he sees severed mineral rights situations in Tuscarawas County, and about why the county's extraction history makes this one of the most common property issues in eastern Ohio. He had said that Tuscarawas County had been a significant oil and gas producing area in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and that the widespread mineral rights severances from that period had produced an enormous inventory of severed mineral rights in the County Recorder's Index. Many of these severances had been executed when oil and gas production in the county had been economically viable. The production had subsequently declined, and the mineral rights had been leased and released over subsequent decades with varying levels of activity. Many of the rights had passed through multiple generations of family ownership, with each generation knowing less about the asset than the one before. By the mid-20th century, many of the mineral rights in the county had fallen into the specific obscurity that the ODMA was designed to address, technically owned by someone, possibly traceable in the records, but unused and unleased and structurally atrophied through decades of neglect. He had said that the new interest in Ohio oil and gas development generated by the Utica and Marcellus shale formations in the 21st century had awakened many of these dormant rights. Companies had hired landmen to search title chains and locate mineral rights holders whose interests predated the shale development era. Many of these searches had turned up exactly the situation mine had presented. A mineral rights chain that was traceable and technically unbroken, but that had lapsed under the ODMA because no savings event had been recorded within any 20-year window. He had said that in his 16 years of practice in Tuscarawas County, he had handled dozens of ODMA cases, and that the outcome depended entirely on whether the recorder index showed a savings event within any 20-year period. When the recorder showed no savings event for more than 20 years, the lapse was clear and the Affidavit of Abandonment was straightforward to prepare and record. The recorder held the complete evidence. The statute held the rule. Together, they told the story.